Hey everybody, welcome to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast, dedicated to raising awareness, sharing IBD stories, and offering support for those with Crohn's and colitis. Together, we can share knowledge, experiences, and help show the world the many faces of IBD. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Gish, Crohn's warrior since 2006 and lifelong fitness fanatic. My guest today is Dayne Sullivan, a Phoenix-based naturopathic medical student from Georgia who's pursuing his dream to become a gastroenterologist. Battling Crohn's disease himself since 2009, Dayne is the hardest working future GI doctor you'll ever meet. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dayne, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we know that every Crohn's and colitis story is different, so why don't you start by telling me your Crohn's story, your first flare-up and lead up to your diagnosis?
Sure. So I was diagnosed in 2009, so it's been almost 10 years. I was finishing up freshman year of college at that point, about an hour and a half from where I grew up. And really what led to it is there's been no diagnosis in my family. So kind of as a background, nobody in my family history has inflammatory bowel disease or anything like that. But I do have a family history of people that had, somewhat stomach issues. And I think part of that's just growing up in the South. And I also have a family history of people that ate tons of greasy food. But for what it's worth, I didn't have a family history of it. So it wasn't on anybody's radar. And so I got used to just, having stomach issues. I thought it was a way of life. And I'd had, problems for a few years. And eventually I was actually working at an urgent care as kind of the part-time receptionist office manager. And I was working with a really good old school ER doc that was moonlighting there on the side. And, eventually the more I talked to him, he was like, yeah, I really think we should investigate this. So I was referred to a gastroenterologist by my PCP. And, I thought, okay, we're going to find out this is nothing. They're going to give me some, basically some Tums or whatever. And so they did a colonoscopy because my symptoms were pretty severe at that point. And colonoscopy, came back. And so there's no question, you have really severe Crohn's disease.
Was it debilitating your life at that point? Were you able to function, or were you just kind of fighting through, so to speak?
Well, I guess both. I was exhausted all the time. I was running to the bathroom as soon as I ate anything. But again, like that had kind of just become, it sounds bad, but that had just kind of become like my norm. And, I thought like I have a bad stomach, this is just life. Until it got really bad, to the point that I was having bloody stools and, constant diarrhea. And, I didn't know about any of this. I'd never heard of the word Crohn's before I was diagnosed. So, it was debilitating, but I think you asked about the first flare-up. When I got the colonoscopy that diagnosed me was in May of 2009. And I had signed up for a summer class. I was an energetic college student that was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, but I knew it was something in the healthcare field. And I was excited because the first year I had taken some, seemingly boring biology and chemistry courses, and I was going to get to take anatomy and physiology in the summer semester. And I got the diagnosis, and they're like, hey, we need to put you on Remicade and, really get you going with treatment. And I knew this needed to be treated, but I was afraid that by doing the infusions, I might miss out on this anatomy class. So I was like, can I just, stick it out for a month and we'll start it then? Like, yeah, sure. Well, a few days before the final of that anatomy class, I seemingly collapsed in my apartment. My roommate picked me up, shoved me in his Mustang, and, sped down the highway to meet my mom halfway.
Wow.
They immediately took me to the hospital. I was in there for a few weeks, almost died. I think I got down to 106 pounds, if I remember right.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a PICC line and 6 IVs. And it took me a couple months to get stable after that before I was actually able to start the Remicade infusions, because I had 3 really large abdominal abscesses at that point. And so that was kind of my first flare, and that was my, like, this needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah, what a shocking way for Crohn's to come on. Just
Yes.
amazing. And it's interesting because I relate to so much of your story, because I was in college when I first started getting stomach issues, and mine came on so slowly over time that I just started thinking that was just the way it was. And so it's funny how much you can normalize something that isn't normal. And so it's just, I think a lot of people fall into that trap until all of the sudden it's just something happens and you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
So tell me, I'm really interested because you're going to become a gastroenterologist, and this is exciting because you have Crohn's, so you're obviously very intimately related to this topic. But tell me about that path. What made you decide to go down this career choice? Because it sounded like in college you sounded almost like a pre-med track. Tell me a little bit about what got you to this here.
Yeah, so I knew I really wanted to be a physician before I went to college. And then when I got to college, I wasn't too sure about it. I wasn't sure if I had the dream is still there, but I wasn't sure if I had what it took. I didn't know if I wanted to do all the training. But then really, even after diagnosis, once I got stable, really going into my junior and senior year, I knew, like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to have to take some classes. I knew I wasn't going to be able to go right after graduation, but I decided, like, I want to go to medical school for sure. And so I was in a health science major, and I was doing research. I ended up publishing a paper on Crohn's, just a meta-analysis, and then I was also trying to get a little bit of clinical research experience through a surgeon that I had met through the urgent care company that I worked for. And I was rounding with a neurosurgical team for a short stint, and then was also doing some hands-on data stuff with observing research in the neonatal unit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to get my feet wet, and I was really interested in neurosurgery. I was a big follower of Ben Carson's books at the time.
Yes.
Long before he entered the political realm. I was a big fan of his story. It was really inspiring.
I think I read his book, When the Air Hits Your Brain. I think that was Ben Carson.
Yeah. I read Gifted Hands about him, and it was really inspiring. And I loved everything about the brain. And I've always been the type, whatever the biggest, the biggest thing is, like, that's what I aimed for. And neurosurgery is kind of, the pinnacle of medicine to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really going for that. I looked at a couple different schools. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get an MD, PhD, and that'll help with residency. I may want to teach one day. So I was just going for it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I had gotten interested in naturopathic medicine. The MD that I was working with was not board certified integrative, but he was someone that dabbled in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of getting interested in it, and I was, reading some stuff with really good results. And my uncle is an osteopathic physician in Alabama, and I had shadowed him a number of times, and he's a really good physician. I really respect him. But to me, I knew family practice was not something that I wanted to do. It just wasn't passionate to me, especially after I'd seen stuff in urgent care. And really all of that led to, I watched a documentary one day that featured a real deal bona fide MD, Dr. Kurt Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
And when I just shot him an email or a Facebook message and was like, hey, saw you on this documentary, like, thanks for what you do. And so he actually wrote me back.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I ended up on a phone call with him and was like, hey, he had gone the pre-med route, and I believe had done an engineering degree before this, biomedical engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up, because of his health experiences, ended up going to naturopathic school. And the more that I talked to him, I was like, this sounds cool, because I didn't want to just be an acupuncturist or herbalist, something like I still wanted to have a prescription pad and still be a doctor. And the more I thought about it, I was like, this is kind of, they see stuff that other, they don't just see routine stuff. They kind of do, everything. And I like that aspect of it. And I also like the aspect of, the surgeons that I met, like they have a really cool job, but the lifestyle of a surgeon can kind of suck, unless you're really married to your job. Even if you're passionate about it, the hours that they pull are really brutal. And I've met a number, I'm not saying all of them, but I have met several surgeons that, said, I love this. I'm not sure if it's worth the toll that it's taken on my family or relationships or marriage or whatever. And I thought, and so just the culmination of stuff, the more that I looked around, the more I thought I'm kind of interested in this naturopathic stuff. So I ended up, taking my prereqs and ended up starting out here in 2015.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about if you can, talk about the difference, because naturopathic medicine, I think, is becoming a much more common term than it ever has been. And really, naturopathic doctors excel in chronic illnesses and preventative primary care. Can you describe for the people listening what some of the differences between an MD degree and naturopathic? Because from what I understand, a lot of the actual first couple years of school is actually the same. So tell me if that's correct, or tell me a little bit about the differences there.
Yeah, so you're absolutely correct. The first couple of years is really, really similar. We take a little bit more on top of that because we're starting to get into like acupuncture courses and such, but essentially everything else is exactly the same. We take anatomy, biochemistry, physiology, microbiology, pharmacology, all of that kind of stuff. You can look up and I can send you a link of, people that have done comparisons. And so the classroom hours are essentially the same. The curriculum is almost identical. We have MDs and PhDs that come in and teach the biomedical courses. And at the end of the first 2 years, we take the MPLEX, which is basically the naturopathic version of the USMLE or the complex with DOs. And I've spoken to a number of people that have taken, the MPLEX and one of the other ones, and they say, it's a different name, but it's all the same. It's a very grueling biomedical exam. So the first years are essentially the same, so to speak. The difference is, so the first thing I'll say is there's a big difference in a naturopath and a naturopathic doctor or naturopathic physician. So a naturopath means that you are a holistic practitioner. You may or may not have done an intern or externship or anything like that. It means you do hold some sort of a certification, but that's basically as far as it goes. A naturopathic doctor or a naturopathic physician is someone that has gone through a fully accredited, legalized, very rigorously structured program, and they actually have taken a board exam and are legally licensed to practice clinical medicine. And so that's a very big distinction, because you'll hear like, oh well, yeah, it's a naturopath, and I'm not discrediting them, but they're not a clinical medical practitioner. Right. If someone's a naturopathic physician, that means they are on the same level of legalization and licensure as an MD or a DO.
That's a great explanation. Thank you for explaining that and really kind of putting it out there, because I think so many people are looking at the different naturopathic remedies and what a physician can bring. Tell me, because I'm kind of interested, what are some of the different tools once you become a naturopathic physician? What are some of the tools you'll have available for treating Crohn's and colitis?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm just thinking that are maybe different from what a traditional MD doctor would do.
So one thing that I love about naturopathic medicine is we don't do general surgery, but we are licensed to do minor surgery. Outside of that, we have all of the tools that an MD does, as far as prescriptions and labs and imaging, things like that. But where I really think we shine is we do have a much bigger toolbox. So, for instance, in Arizona, naturopathic physicians are licensed to do acupuncture, botanical medicine, so like herbs. We're also licensed to do physical manipulation, so a lot of the same things that a chiropractor would do. In addition to that, we're also licensed to practice nutritional therapy, which includes IV nutrients, as well as homeopathy. And I feel like I'm forgetting one. And so, to say the least, there's a much broader scope of what we can do. So I definitely think that's a big component. And the question that I think a lot of us toy with more is not, can we help this patient? The question is, what modality do I want to use? Do I want to use several? Do I want to use one and really target it? And so, for us, it's not, can we treat this patient, is how are we going to treat this patient?
And
I think that's where we shine.
And that's so critical to have options, especially looking at it from the patient's side, to be able to come to a naturopathic doctor and know that, all right, well, we've got a whole arsenal of things that we can try. There's choices, there are options. Because I think sometimes in the traditional medical world, I think sometimes we feel, I know I've felt at times, just kind of stuck. It's like, take this drug or don't. It's like, well, what else is there? So.
Right. And even in the holistic realm, I think, the reason, because people say like, well, but, are you okay with learning all of this? Like, you're really going to use all this? And so the difference is, let's say that you go see a naturopathic physician and they may not do a lot of like physical manipulation. Maybe that's not their thing. Maybe they don't feel comfortable with it, whatever. But they still know the lingo. They still have that clinical experience. So, whereas if you go to an acupuncturist, and the acupuncturist may or may not be able to discuss your lab values with you. And then if you go to your gastroenterologist the next week and you say, yeah, I went to the acupuncturist and, it kind of helped, and these are the points they did. The gastroenterologist probably isn't going to know. I mean, they'll know about acupuncture, but they're not going to be able to interpret, the points or the meridians they use. But if you go to a naturopathic physician and they speak the lingo of the acupuncturist, and they're familiar with the manipulations, and they know the pharmacology, and they're able to look at your lab work, and the naturopaths, I think, are really becoming the kind of liaison, because we're taught to speak the lingo of the MDs, but we're also taught the lingo of all of these other professions.
That's so wonderful. It's needed. So you're in your third year, correct?
That's right.
And so what's the rest of the process look like for you? Is it a 4-year? And then tell me about how that works.
So it's a good question. We take classes, which is a little bit different than the allopathic model. We take classes all the way up till graduation. The third and fourth year, we take less classes and more clinic shifts. So right now I'm in clinical rotations. And so, it's a 2-year process of seeing patients. And the closer you get to graduation, the more patients you see and the less classes you take. So that's what happens until graduation. Once you graduate, you have a few months to study, and then you take your second set of boards, NPLEX 2. And then once you pass NPLEX 2, you're now a licensed physician in the state that you took those boards in. So for me, it would be most likely in Arizona. Going forward after that, another way that we differ from the allopathic community is we're not legally required to complete a residency. I think except in Utah, they're required to do 1 year, but most of the other states, the majority of the states, we're not required to complete a residency in order to practice. Now, most people, if they want to specialize in something like, say, oncology, they're going to seek out to complete a residency in oncology, but we're not required to. And, for me, I'm hoping to find one and apply to one that focuses more on GI cases.
That's great information. It's really good. So let's shift back to you and your IBD now. And you seem to be in a really good spot managing your IBD, from at least from the outside looking in. It looks that way. So
right.
If that's true, what did it take for you to get to this point?
A lot of trial and error, to be honest. So for me, and this is one thing that I will throw out there. As a naturopathic physician, we can debate what's the best way to go and whether or not, you should vaccinate people or kids but the one thing that I think is a huge misconception is that, well, we're naturopathic students, we're naturopathic doctors, we're against drugs and surgery, and that's 100% myth.
Mm-hmm.
I was put into remission through surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Would I do it again, knowing what I know now? Maybe not. Do I think it was the right decision at the time? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, what it took was I had been on a plethora of stuff, probably every biologic that's on the market minus Incivio
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And at one point I had gotten very close to remission, if not, it was never confirmed by biopsy, but I felt great. I had gotten off of all the medications and things were rolling good. I got in a serious car accident and immediately had a huge flare that didn't really go away.
Mm-hmm.
I was put on Remicade again, tried a couple different things. Nothing really worked. And so at that point, my gastroenterologist, this was early 2015.
Mm-hmm.
He said, listen, the good news is, we did a colonoscopy. Good news is, your disease is not really any worse than it was in 2009. It
Wow.
looks the same. The bad news is it's still there.
Right.
Because of this trauma that you went through recently. So can I please cut it out now? And, me at the time, wanting to go into naturopathic medicine, like, surgery. And like, I remember I was like, what if I don't get into naturopathic school because they found out I had surgery?
Oh.
They don't, like, that was,
right.
that was the insecurity of mine. But I was just like, what if this cost me a career?
Right.
But, I underwent the surgery and was put in, spontaneous remission.
That's fantastic.
And then I was good until I got stressed out in medical school.
Yeah.
And, I knew, like, I don't want to, it wasn't a pride thing. It was just like, I came out here to do this. Like, I know there's got to be a better way. And so I ended up, going the true naturopathic route. I've yet to be on a pharmaceutical since 2015,
Wow.
knock on wood.
Wow. Yeah.
And so really what it took was, I went to a really renowned homeopath,
Mm-hmm.
that's also a naturopathic physician at our school. And between working with him and then now the physician that I see now that's also a naturopathic physician, I was able to get back on my feet and really get to the place that I am now. But that took a lot of trial and error. It took a lot of working through emotional stuff,
Mm-hmm.
For me about school, about being 2,000 miles away from home, about, insecurity, about, does this stuff actually work? But I think really what it took not giving up.
Right.
It took not giving up, and it took really, it sounds cliche, but it took really not caring about, is this going to impact my schooling? Well, yeah, it may impact your schooling. Well, but, what if people call me, a fraud because of this? Well, they may call you a fraud. They may call you a fraud anyway. And it took really working through that stuff. And so the biggest thing that I try to tell people is, and probably not enough, is you can do naturopathic care, you can do allopathic care, you can do whatever. We know that Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, is a very physical thing. We can see it on biopsy. That doesn't mean that the disease is 100% physical in nature. And so for me, honest to God, over the last little while, what has kept me on a track of getting better and better is, doing the right things naturopathically and following up with my physician. And that all is necessary. But really dealing with the mental and emotional aspect is really what gave me the jump to where I am now.
Yeah, I think finding ways to focus on ourselves, put things aside, and take the path that we need to can be so valuable. How did you find ways to manage this stress? Because the stress in medical school is huge and it puts you in a flare. How do you manage it now? Is it all naturopathic or holistic ways? What do you do to? Mm-hmm.
as far as like that versus like
No,
like
just in
drugs
general.
or
Just in general, how do you manage stressful situations or know that because your life, I'm assuming, is rather stressful. A third year medical student.
yeah.
What do you
So
do?
part of it is you get used to craziness in medical school.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is you just I still struggle with like test anxiety from time to time. If it's a big exam, if it's worth a lot of points, or if the class is tough. Um, Part of it, is one just learning to embrace the reality that like you're going to get stressed out. Like not every day
Mm-hmm.
is going to go well. Things are going to come at you that aren't planned. You're going to be throwing curveballs. And so part of it was having, ironically, it's one of those things like if somebody says, don't think of the color purple, the
Mm-hmm.
one thing you just thought of was the color purple. And so, if your goal is to not be stressed out anymore, that's not reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's in 2019, like you're going to get stressed out. That's the world that we live in, at least in America. And for me, like I thought that for a long time. And I finally figured out you need to stop trying to not be stressed out. You need to figure out what you're going to do when you do get stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I really think that helps is I audit me. I don't audit, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm standing compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's more than just, don't care about other people's opinion. Like I think caring about other people's opinion is somewhat important, but I think that you need to look at yourself through the lens of, your story.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I heard a long time ago from a pastor to listen to is he said, you need to make sure you don't compare your behind the scenes to somebody else's highlight reel.
I like
Because
that.
the one thing that I follow on Instagram, Ross Simmons always says, just remember we're all winging it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super true. So I just, for me, the way I manage stress is to keep in mind that, everybody's got stuff being thrown at them. Some people have it easier than others day to day,
Mm-hmm.
but that can change in a minute. And the last thing that I do is something that Gary Vaynerchuk said a while back that has really stuck with me is you need to be able to look at things. It's not that you don't care, you should care immensely,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to be able to quickly label something as a macro loss or a micro loss. And a macro loss is you get a phone call that your immediate family member passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get a macro loss of you just got sent to prison for the rest of your life without parole. Those are macro losses. Pretty much anything else is micro.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much anything else, it's not going to matter 10 years from now. And it's not worth causing horrific inflammation that may lead to a surgery. And I just keep that in mind. I look at it and go, how important is this?
That's some great advice, and I think we all need to remember that probably daily. So tell me, you chose to go under the care of a naturopathic physician, is who's seeing you now. Mm-hmm. What kind of tips would you have if someone is listening and this is sparking in their minds, hey, maybe I should go check out a naturopathic physician for my IBD? What kind of tips would you give someone on how to find one and choosing the right one?
So the biggest thing that I would tell them is to check them out and see if they're licensed. I'm not against people that are holistic practitioners that aren't licensed. It's just a lot harder to be vetted.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask, check and see. I always just ask, hey, I'm Dr. Such and Such. Great. Yeah. So what state are you licensed in? Mm-hmm. They may not be licensed in the state they practice in because they practice in Kentucky. Well, they don't license naturopathic physicians. But if you are a naturopathic physician, you hold a license somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I always ask, hey, where did you go to school? What state do you hold your licensure in? That's a quick way to screen and see, is this person, an actual physician, or what kind of training they have. The other thing that I keep in mind, and I almost feel bad saying this, like I'm kind of, committing treason against mm-hmm. my field, is just because somebody is an ND does not automatically mean you should put every trust and faith in them. Just as much as, if you go see an MD, then you're supposed to think, oh, well, they're all about drugs and surgery. That's not true. Mm-hmm. Some of the best integrative medicine practitioners that I know are MDs and DOs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met some naturopathic physicians. There's not many, but I've met a couple that I wouldn't feel comfortable referring to.
Right.
And I'm probably not supposed to say that, but it's just the truth. And so I always tell people, like, ask around. And, I say it frequently on social media. I don't know a lot of MDs outside of Phoenix in my hometown,
Mm-hmm.
but I do know a lot of naturopathic physicians because that's where I devote, most of my time to. So if you don't know, of one and you don't feel comfortable, just reach out. Like, I'll help you find one. I'm not affiliated with anybody. I don't get paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting a kickback. I just want to help people get better. And I can't give medical advice right now. So I feel like the closest thing I can do that is make sure that they see somebody that's really, really good.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your diet, because you're currently following a plant-based diet, and I'm curious, how's that helping you, and how did you get to that path? Because IBD, we know that food is so different for every one of us. So I love to hear about the different stories and the different journeys. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So for me, plant-based, currently, and this may change, months from now, but plant-based for me is what allows me to feel the best. It allows me to, not have flare-ups right now. I got really sick, not because of a Crohn's flare, but I got really sick because of some well-intentioned but not great treatment of a previous doctor a year or so, maybe a year and a half or so ago now. And it took a lot to recover from before I got to the naturopathic position I'm with now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got where I couldn't process meat. I mean, I could eat the smallest amount of beef and would immediately, become obscenely nauseous and get really sick.
Wow.
And so, I just experimented with, okay, so what can I digest? And for me, that was plants. That was plant-based. It was easy. I wasn't eating a ton of kale, but I was eating, potatoes and, trying to think what I was eating back then, potatoes and like some mock meat or, some grains. And so I've slowly built back into, okay, now I can eat carrots, I can eat bell peppers, okay, I'm not really quite ready for lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it took over some months that I figured out. And I've experimented, I've eaten a little bit of this or that that's not 100% vegan, and my body hasn't accepted it well. And so for me, it's what I tell it's what you just said. Everybody's different, just because the thing that I love about naturopathic medicine is it's super individualized. Because you have Crohn's disease, all that tells me is you have, transmural inflammation, lesions in your intestines, that we can put that label on it. But that doesn't tell me, what your background is, whether or not you have anxiety, what your family history is, or what food your body functions on the best. For me right now, it's a plant-based diet. Like I said, that may change, but I know from seeing your Instagram stuff, like you don't follow a 100% plant-based diet because you found something that works better for you. And that's amazing. That's what I want for everybody.
Yeah. And that's why it's so interesting to me, because, the way you feel after a couple bites of ground beef or meat and immediately that it's a bad decision, and I'll eat a vegetable and it's, I have that same feeling. So I think the important thing is for people with IBD to listen to those signals and maybe not fight your body on those signals. And if your body's telling you, I need to be plant-based, go plant-based. If your body's telling you, I need meat, eat meat. But I think learning to listen to our body is key. And it can be hard to do, I think, when you're battling a chronic illness.
Absolutely.
So does it matter for you if the vegetables are cooked or if they're raw? Do you tolerate the raw vegetables?
I guess I'm a weird case. I actually tolerate raw vegetables better than I do cooked, in the sense of, I don't know if it's because they don't taste as good or what, but I have to be really careful eating like steamed vegetables. Whereas if I, raw stuff, it seemingly digests better. And I know that's not the norm, but that's just the way it is for me right now.
Wow. So tell me about kind of in the past when you've flared, are there any tips that you have found that works from time to time to help you manage being in a flare and kind of taking care of yourself and finding a way out of that?
Yeah, so I think for me, and this has evolved over time because I haven't had a big flare in a while, but I have learned for me that a big trigger of it is stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of do a balancing act of when I don't try to fight it, it's not that I was ashamed of it, but like when I worked before medical school, I was a restaurant manager, and I liked it. It was a fun job for me. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the nature of the job. But whenever I would get in a flare, I would almost try to not necessarily hide it, but kind of just act like it wasn't happening because I didn't want it to slow me down. And in reality, that usually caused me to suffer longer and for it to be more intense than if I had just, called my boss who was really understanding and said, hey, listen, like I'm in a flare, like I need to be out for a couple of days. And I probably would have gotten back to work and been, 100% sooner.
Yeah.
So for me, I've learned not to fight it. If I'm in a flare, accept that you're in a flare and do what it takes, to get out of it. Another thing is, I immediately will take time or try to at least and say, hey, like I'm out, I'm not going to do anything that stresses me. I'm not going to do anything that's super exertive, until this is over. The other thing is I try not to, have a pity party. So it's this, I don't know if I can explain this well, but it's a balancing act of saying, I'm not going to ignore this. I have Crohn's disease. I'm currently experiencing symptoms. This is real and I need to accept that reality. At the same time, I need to realize this is a flare. It's not a death sentence. There's people that go through this all the time. And so while I am accepting this reality, I'm not going to act like I'm a lost cause.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So now that you haven't had a big flare in a while, do you find that fitness and doing heavy exertion, does anything kind of help, or does fitness or movement play a role for you in managing the IBD?
So for me, full transparency, I'm not doing a ton of fitness or physical training right now. And really for me, that's because, by the time I get done with school and business stuff for the day, I'm pretty spent. And so I don't, I have friends in medical school that somehow, are superhumans and they still keep a regimented CrossFit regimen. We have a nationally known CrossFit athlete in our class. I mean, there's people that do incredible stuff. They go run Ragnars and Ironmans and whatnot. And that's just not me. I enjoy fitness. I enjoy a pickup game of basketball, but I'm not somebody that has this super structured, I wake up at 5 to go to the gym every day. Because that for me, what I have learned, I tried to do that first year and it didn't work because it just, it made me run down. It made me more susceptible to flare days.
Yeah, I was going to say that it would almost be the straw that breaks the camel's back for you when you're juggling so much other stress in your life that if you were to try to put something like a big, heavy workout regimen in there, it'd be too much.
Yep. And so for me, what I do is I'm somebody that goes sympathetic very quickly. I'm very easily on edge. And so for me, I do try to work in being outside, especially when it's nice weather in Arizona. So that may mean taking a walk or, going up to the mountains for a day or whatever it takes to get away. And so for me, fitness doesn't play as much of a part right now as it does doing something that is anti-stress out in nature.
Yeah, I think we underestimate how important it is to be outside, to just be doing simple movements, whether you're walking, hiking, or just being outside and getting the sunshine, feeling de-stressed and taking a break from everything.
I totally agree.
So tell me a little bit about your social media and kind of advocacy, because on your social media, you're starting to, you use part of that as a way to advocate and share information about Crohn's. So what kind of compelled you to start sharing your story and being open about it?
I think for me is there's a lot of people, I'm not from Arizona, I'm from Georgia, and there it's not like you're shunned, if you have inflammatory bowel disease, but I come from a rural part of the state. And it's the one thing that really struck a chord with me is I started seeing people on social media that talked about, people would make the remark that, yeah, but you don't look sick, or, wow, you may have a disease, you look really good, and it almost downplays, and it's a huge slap in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like telling a diabetic, wow, why, I can't even tell that your sugar is high right now, why don't we go get some dessert?
Right.
You would never say that to a diabetic.
Yeah.
And so to me, like, I think for me, I was never like made fun of or anything. I have really tight-knit relationships with my brothers, and they, would have quickly gotten on to somebody had I been criticized. So I never received like complete abuse because of my diagnosis, but just seeing the people and going, wow, I can't believe this is a thing, and for me, really what compelled me is there's a lot better options out there. I see people on Instagram all the time, and I want to reach out and go, hey, naturopathic medicine is not magic. Like, it's not like we say a prayer over you and all of a sudden your disease disappears. But at the same time, I want to go, there's such a better way. Like, I've seen it in the clinic. I've experienced it as a patient. It doesn't have to be the way that you're experiencing right now. And for me, just, I guess the empathetic part of me is, I didn't come to naturopathic school to become a billionaire. Nobody goes into naturopathic medicine to make crazy money. And if they do, they find out really quickly that's a bad goal.
Right.
But for me, I just, it really hurts me to see the amount of stuff out there that, it's not that I know people put up stuff on their Instagram feed, and people that don't have this disease or that may not be in the medical profession may go, yeah, great. Like, I know they're all positive and stuff. Like, here's another post about their infusion, or like, oh yeah, I'm sure the colonoscopy prep is kind of a downer, but like, I'm tired of hearing about, your nausea. And to me, I go, yeah, and they are too. Like, the last thing they want to do is wake up tomorrow and be nauseous again.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just the empathy of knowing, I want to advocate for, I know of a better way to handle this, and I want to help people get there, because life is too short and it's way too long to have to live miserably.
It is. And I think it's an important message you're spreading too. I mean, it's basically telling people that there are options. There's other things that maybe haven't been considered, or just things to try, but there's more out there.
Yep, exactly.
So is there one thing that you've found over the years that you wish people knew about Crohn's and colitis, but they don't?
I think one thing, well, the thing that comes to mind is it is possible to get back to a normal life. I can't, it would be absurd for me to make a claim that, if you follow this protocol, or if you see a naturopathic physician, that a year from now you'll be better. I can't say anything to that, but I can say that Crohn's disease is by far not a death sentence. And so I would tell people that you should take it seriously, that it's not, IBD is not something to play around with. But at the same time, if you are willing to do what it takes to find a qualified physician that really cares and is really competent, your life can be a whole lot different a year from now.
This disease certainly takes persistence and finding that right path for you. And I know it can be it's very frustrating at times, because I know I've felt it over the years, but just like you're saying, it takes that persistence and just the determination that I will find something. I just need to keep trying. And it can be frustrating, but you got to keep trying.
Yep, absolutely.
What's the biggest challenge? And maybe you've already talked about it just in our conversation, but what's the biggest challenge you've faced since having Crohn's, and how did you get through it?
I think the biggest challenge for me probably is stress, and we have talked some about that. But I think the biggest obstacle for me was, trying to keep in mind that I do have this condition, and I tried really, really hard to toe the line of, I want to be identified as I'm someone that has Crohn's because I want to try to be a role model for, I have been in devastating circumstances, and it's not that I'm some superhero. It's just because I have a really good doctor and I wasn't willing to give up. You can get to a point where you're able to attend medical school despite having Crohn's. And so I try to ride the line of being able to be labeled as I have Crohn's disease so that I can be that role model, but at the same time, make sure to put it out there that like Crohn's disease is something that I have. It is not who I am.
Right.
I don't want to be known as, yeah, he's the guy that has Crohn's disease. Like, hey, he's the guy that is the doctor despite the fact that he got that when he was 19.
Yeah.
And so for me, the biggest obstacle is knowing that I have it and knowing on some days it's like, hey, if you have not been eating as good as you can, or you've had a stressful week, this other person that's super healthy and has, crazy good genetics and a spotless family history, that's a CrossFit athlete, you may not be able to keep up with them in this 14-hour day. But it's okay if you worked straight through for 11 hours and you need to go home and somebody else stays for another 3. That doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. That doesn't mean that you're a bad medical student. It means that you're tired and you need to go get rest.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing for me was learning to, hey, this is not something that, you should label yourself as. Like, you are a fully functioning human being that's capable of great things. But at the same time, you need to know that there are limits, and that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just reality.
I think that's great for everyone to remember. And I really think it's wonderful what you're doing as a role model to show people that, just as you were saying, that this is part of me, but it's not all of me. It's not who I am. And I think that's a great distinction to make in that. So
Thank you.
If people want to keep up with your IBD journey and your journey through medical school and what you're doing, where can they follow you online?
So probably the best place to follow me right now is on Instagram. My handle is just Dayne Sullivan. That's where I do, most of the advocacy and the stuff that I put out there. I'm also on Snapchat, not as much. And probably the best place to interact with me, because Instagram's getting kind of busy, probably the best place to interact with me is on Twitter. I'm a lot faster to respond on there. So my handle's the same way. It's just at Dayne Sullivan. And that's probably the best way to get in touch with me right now.
Perfect. I'll put those in the show notes so that people can link and find you easily. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Is there anything that I didn't ask today that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I probably would put a plug in. So I'm actually in the middle of getting ready to launch a podcast with a colleague that's going to focus on homeopathy. And I know that's something that, it's near and dear to me, but the reason that I'm starting it is because, it's been really profound. It's been probably the number one thing medication-wise that has kept me, where I am stable and in remission. And so I would say that if nothing else, a lot of people know about naturopathic medicine now, but I would be quick to tell somebody to not shy away from this. You go to a qualified physician and say, hey, we want to, how do you feel about homeopathy? Coming from somebody that's experienced it and somebody that was a huge skeptic before, for whatever, there's a number of reasons that the MD medical community is against it. Most of it is because of ignorance and because they care about their patients and they don't want to see anything happen to them. But homeopathy is the thing that has really helped me out. It's super effective. It's super cost effective because it's really cheap. And it's something that, if you look back to the history of medicine, has been very, very stable. even though in America it's been critiqued really harshly. So that's the one thing that we probably didn't talk about that's super important to me. And, in every case that I've heard of that people have gone to a naturopathic physician and have used it for inflammatory bowel disease, it's worked wonders. Can't guarantee that it works for everybody, but everybody that I've known has seen amazing results with it. So I would just put a plug in for that to watch out for.
Yes. And do you have an estimated start date for when the podcast will be coming out?
We're working, as much as we can outside of school behind the scenes. So hopefully later this year, definitely by the end of the year, but hopefully later this year, probably late spring, early summer, we're going to try to be rolling out episodes. So definitely look out for it. We're going to be presenting a lot of research and interviews with people that are for and against it. We don't want to just be the poster child for homeopathy, but we want to take a really good look at it so that people can, when they choose to try it, that they're really informed about it.
That's going to be a fantastic podcast to have. I'll be keeping an eye out for it.
Yeah, I'm pumped about it.
Yeah. Do you have a name of what it's going to be if people want to put it on their radar to think about it, or should they just search for you kind of later on in the year and keep up with your Instagram and Twitter?
Yeah, so we don't have an official name for it on the books yet. We're throwing a couple things around. The best thing to do, is if you keep up with me on social media, that'll probably be the place that we announce it first anyway. So, as we get closer, I'll definitely be putting out stuff for it. So yeah, if you just keep up with me, then you'll be sure not to miss it.
Fantastic. I'll do that. And once it is, I'll share it on my channels as well and help get it out there.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you. That wraps up the interview for today. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking with me. I feel like this is really valuable information that you've been able to share today, just with different information about naturopathic medicine and tips for finding a doctor, tips for how you've managed your disease. So thank you very much for coming on and talking with me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have an IBD story, either as a patient or a family member, that you'd like to share as a guest on this podcast, or if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, send me an email at crohnsfitnessfood@gmail.com. If you'd like to learn more about me and my Crohn's journey, follow me on Instagram using @crohnsfitnessfood, or visit my blog for in-depth articles about my struggles and victories with Crohn's through diet, fitness, and lifestyle at www.crohnsfitnessfood.com. And finally, remember, be strong, be grateful, and be the warrior that you are.